We have a direct connection by telephone with 4 other locations today. Calgary, Durango, Shreveport, and Albuquerque. Welcome to those who are present in these particular locations. We who are here assembled in the Dome Chapel on Sunrise Ranch are delighted to have you with us. Individually, wherever we may be, we are responsible for the sanctuary which we bring with us and which may then permeate the place where we are. We do not, of course, bring it with us unless we have it with us. And we don't have it with us unless it has been consistently our experience in our momentary living, day by day. There is a familiar passage, several passages actually, taken from the book of Genesis, which I would read again this morning. Not because they may relate to some state of affairs in the past, but because they obviously portray what is present with us now. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. And Noah walked with God. Noah walked with God. There was one bright spot on the horizon. State of human beings on earth is, to say the least, deplorable. Every imagination of the thoughts of men's hearts is only evil continually. That is an accurate description of the state of human consciousness. Regardless of all the efforts that have been put forth, for what might be described as self-improvement, absolutely nothing has been achieved thereby. The state of human consciousness remains as it has always been, as far as anyone can remember. The inevitable result of this sad and deplorable state of affairs is the demise of the human race. There has been, obviously, long opportunity for what might well be described as repentance. Thus far, it has never been taken. Perhaps we ourselves, and some others on the face of the earth, may have awakened somewhat to this necessity, that there might be emergence from the deplorable human state. The human state is intent upon manipulating the various forms that are present on earth in order to produce a better condition. But it isn't the conditions that are at fault. It isn't the conditions that need to be bettered. It is the fact that human beings remain in their deplorable state. Nothing of any value whatsoever can be achieved by manipulating forms. When the manipulators are in the deplorable human state. It doesn't matter much whether those manipulations are deemed to be good or whether they are deemed to be bad. It is the attempt to manipulate that produces the sad effects. It is assumed that if one's motivation in manipulation is good, then the effects will be a blessing. But ultimately, it never works that way. All human manipulations end up by being a curse. No matter how good the intent was. And yet, virtually the whole human population is intent upon their good intents. This is the way to ultimate disaster. There is considerable evidence that that disaster is not far away. It may seem to many people that everything is conspiring to bring disaster. But the conspiring is the state and motivation of human beings. So we can agree, I'm sure, that this portrayal which I read to you is very accurate and applicable right now. Presumably it must have been applicable in the past too. But we, after all, simply the children of prior generations. But there was Noah. And Noah walked with God. It was said of Enoch that he walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. I think most people imagine that if one were to walk with God, all the best one could do would either be to follow after God like a faithful dog, or conceivably walk beside him. That would really be something. But this statement with respect to Enoch is an accurate portrayal of what happens. Enoch was not. There was no human identity called Enoch anymore. God took him. Here is the state of man as he really is. We talk about being one with God. There's only need to talk about being one with God if we are not one with God. In this sense, God is a human invention. a human invention because human beings are separate from what they call God. And this is insisted upon. As we have noted, we have all experienced the state where we feel that we have the right to do as we please. This right is deemed to be essential to freedom. Freedom being equated with doing as one pleases. Virtually all the human population have been quite blind to the fact that doing as one pleases is bondage. Because it takes the human being out of the state of reality into a condition humanly invented. Because man was not created to do as he pleases. Of course, I suppose one could modify that statement to say that when he was first created, he did do as he pleased, because he pleased to do according to what he really was. At that point, there was no incentive to do anything else. But obviously, there has been an incentive since that time to do something else. So that all human beings now deem themselves to be separate individuals. And they are going to do whatever they can to maintain that condition of being a separate individual. Because it is a terrifying thought to somehow be obliterated as a separate individual. Of course, the fact of the matter is that generation after generation, everybody has been obliterated as a separate individual. Of course, there have been all kinds of theories developed and enshrined in patterns of belief that somehow or other individual human beings were not being obliterated. This gave hope to those who were still present in form on earth that there really was something worthwhile or meaningful about all this nonsensical condition. But the fact of the matter is that there is nothing meaningful or sensible about the human condition. It is an imaginary state which is very real to human beings, self-produced. As we note, virtually all people are self-preoccupied. Preoccupied in trying to preserve something that really doesn't exist. It takes a tremendous amount of sweat of the brow to preserve it for whatever it is, 70 years and 10, they have said, but it's a little longer these days, for some at least. But the flicker of an eye, if we're thinking of it in universal terms, and what effort is put into this business of trying to preserve oneself as a separate individual. But the fact of the matter is that that is a lie. One has no existence as a separate individual And each one finds that out eventually. But when he finds it out, it doesn't do him much good. There's no separate individual anymore. So there is this matter of walking with God, as it is put here. Then there is just one identity. If there is just one identity, we don't need to have separate identities anymore. The separate identity idea has been preserved in religious circles, particularly Christian circles, by the idea that there's a God on one hand and the devil on the other. This is the view when the state of separation exists. But if, as an individual, you walk with God, you are not, for he takes you. You lose your human identity, in other words. Now, Noah went on being called Noah for sake of identity. But if he walked with God, God took him. And while it may have been convenient to refer to him as Noah, that really wasn't his name. We have become aware of what the name of God really is. That name is I am. All of us, whether in the dome here or some other location, in this moment could say, I am present. But having said that, I'm sure that there is still a conditioning element in your view of what you have said which equates it with this human personality. If I were to ask the question, and this is a hypothetical question, who are you? I'm sure you would be inclined to give your name. John Jones. And back of that name, there are all kinds of statistics. Everybody had a father and a mother. This is a commonly shared state of affairs. And beyond that again, ancestors of all kinds. If you want to consider human relationships, we are all doubtless relatives. And probably you don't have to go back too many generations to find that out. The interconnections are all there. And things seem to continue much as they always have since the fathers fell asleep, as it was put somewhere. The fathers fell asleep, and all their progeny have subsequently been asleep, dreaming about this very peculiar, odd, separate identity which is clung to so desperately. Self-preservation is said to be a primary motivation in human experience. But what is the self that one is endeavoring to preserve? if there is such a self which must be preserved by human effort, it's unreal. Because the self, the reality of self, doesn't need to be preserved. It is. I am. To walk with God is to lose one's life. Lose one's existence in the human sense. This happens anyway, sooner or later. But it may be allowed to happen sooner. Not by committing suicide, as some seem to think, but by being willing to relinquish the human state which involves the relinquishment of human motivations. And that, of course, is the sticker with most, because most want to do what they want to do. And if they can explain away what they want to do in satisfactory terms, then it is considered to be commendable. One of the attitudes could well be, I want to serve my fellow man. That's good, isn't it? Commendable. But who wants to do it? This sad travesty of an identity, or the one I am. If it is the one I am who does what needs to be done, all right. But that isn't the case. And let us not fool ourselves on this score. From the human standpoint, there are those who follow out all kinds of techniques, hopefully expecting that they will be elevated enough to handle their affairs of serving others in a way that will be creative. We have had people on earth aspiring to serve others and going through all kinds of techniques in order to gain the expertise to do it. That's what is thought. Some see this in terms, in what they might refer to as spiritual terms or religious terms, doing good for their fellow men, whatever, in that way. Others might see it from the standpoint of the medical profession, for instance. We're going to serve our fellow man by learning all the techniques of medicine or any other of the so-called healing arts. Let's get all this expertise and we'll be able to serve people. But what is the service? The endeavor to preserve the false identity, isn't it? The human being wants to stay himself, as he thinks of himself. Self-preservation. Therefore, all these things have been developed in order to save something that needs to pass away. And it does pass away, inevitably passes away. It's become a sort of fetish this day, particularly in the so-called developed world, that everybody must be kept alive somehow. How ridiculous. One might as well participate in that old business that was popular in Egypt. Mummifying everybody. Well, of course, they are to a certain extent, even now, at least some, to try to preserve something that should pass away. And of course, when these mummies are found, oh, this is something tremendous. It's a corpse. Something that should have passed away probably 5,000 years ago. It's done using different methods these days, so that a flicker of life remains in the physical form at great expense, great effort. For what? From the standpoint of any human being, even someone who is not in intensive care, why should they remain alive? What's the point? Well, I'm sure, felt it was necessary, incumbent upon us, that question should be answered. And that there might be some point to our presence on earth. Being a part of the state of affairs that is in the world now, and trying to preserve that, is not why we're present on earth. We have discovered, up to a point at least, that our presence on earth is not that the human entity should be preserved for itself, as though it had some importance all on its own, but that it might be present in order to accommodate the one I am, so that the one I am might have the opportunity to express the truth in living now. I think it is becoming more clearly evident to people everywhere that the human world, as we know it, can't be preserved much longer. There is still, of course, the good-intentioned endeavor to manipulate the forms of the human world so that it supposedly could continue to exist. But no matter who does what, it always brings greater confusion and greater destructiveness, greater disintegration. It matters not how good the intentions of people are. Makes no difference. There has been that saying for a long time, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's the fact of the matter. Nobody believes it, of course, because everybody has good intentions. But if you pave the road to hell, you slide there much quicker. And it seems that that process is speeding up these days. So it isn't by manipulation of form that anything constructive can be achieved. What needs to happen, of course, has been described as a change of heart. But human beings are just as incapable of changing their hearts and producing anything constructive as they are in changing the forms and producing anything constructive. If there is to be a change of heart, it comes not because someone manipulated it, not because someone has a technique by which hearts may be changed. There are all kinds of those. It was said there's a sucker born every minute. Follow those things out. And by the way, it always seems that something that's dredged up from the far distant past is going to be far more valuable than something which someone produces now. But they're all equally valueless. There is nothing you can dredge up out of the past that will be of the slightest meaning now. If I have read these words, which presumably were transcribed a long time ago, I have read them as my words now. Not as words portraying a flood that took place a long time ago. But here is a way, a means of discovering what it is that's happening now, so that we may participate in the process by which what is happening now may be drawn into the way things really work. The creative process, in other words, which has always been present, but human beings would have nothing to do with it. We don't want that. We want to have our own way. We want to produce things along these lines. We want to get ourselves a nice environment that we're going to enjoy, and all this. Everybody's been trying to get what he thinks he wants, and they have devised untold, complicated methods of doing this, all of which is considered to be progress. Progress in what direction? Where is it headed? One could hardly call that progress if all it is headed toward is disaster. Well, I suppose you can have progress toward disaster, but that's exactly what's happening. So to worship progress is the most ridiculous thing that anyone can do. It's saying, I'm going to ensure that we reach the end of that progress, which is disaster. There are multiplication of all kinds of things, forms, which are supposedly going to make things better. How ridiculous. And the God of progress is worshipped with greatest fervor by virtually the whole of the population in this part of the world, at least. And the idea is to inspire others who haven't got on the bandwagon yet to leap onto the, I don't suppose it's the gospel train, it's not good news, the bad news train, which goes without pause, express, to disaster. Well, all that may be seen, but what is needful is that this applies to each person, accept the responsibility that is inherent in the one I am. Not in this strange, very peculiar character that I've thought myself to be. And human beings have all this vast variety of peculiar characters, that don't get along together, and they try to find ways and means of getting them to mesh somehow. Of course, marriage was deemed to be one method by which we could get two people to mesh. If they take the older words of a marriage service more literally, then perhaps they will be able to mesh. And the golden wedding comes up. But maybe the people still love each other, but they become accustomed to living together, and it's convenient. The old farmer who lost his wife said, "Well, I never really did like her." Yeah, they lived together for 50 years or whatever it was. We share these moments now letting a certain quietness be our experience, a stillness perhaps, because this is natural in the sanctuary. Noah built an ark. This was presumably supposed to have been the form of a boat. We're not interested in what happened then, but what's happening now. Because there certainly is something to be created. We could call it an ark if we don't think of that as a boat. And if we don't think of it in terms of form, there is something to be created. And we ourselves have found ourselves drawn together to participate, as we claim, in a creative process. Something is to be created. What? Most people think of it simply as a body of people who get along together. Now, there may be a body of people who get along better than most, but that is not the end and aim of things. There is something to be created. I suppose we might call it a vibrational ark, a sanctuary. I've spoken of this dome as being the setting for a sanctuary. But the sanctuary is here only because we bring it, if we bring it. So it is something not quite so tangible as this dome, for instance. It is necessary that there should be a flesh body of people drawn together in order that there might be generated, by reason of that fact, the vibrational substance of the ark. The ark is not a physical form, insofar as the present experience is concerned. It may have been in the past. We don't really know that. They tried to dig it up out of Mount Ararat. But if that has any meaning at all, it is because it's applicable now in relationship to present experience. And I just used the words which I read because there is the application immediately. We're well aware of the violence and corruption, the destructiveness that is present all around. Why? Well, because of the evil imaginations of men's hearts, that's all. That's what produced it. It's not going to go away without the evil imaginations of men's hearts going away. That seems obvious. Scarcely anyone has looked at it, though, apparently. We're going to manipulate forms, and that'll fix everything up. Without letting any change come in human experience. Well, we're concerned to let the change come in ourselves. We can't let it come in somebody else. You can't even make it come in somebody else. Did you ever try? It's a lost cause. Even if you succeeded, how awful that would be. Someone made in your image and likeness. Oh. No. There is a vibrational form, if you could put it that way, body, to be generated. In order for it to be, it must have the vibrational substance to be. And that vibrational substance can only be generated out of the flesh bodies of human beings. Human beings are useful in that regard. They're not useful in all the things that they think they're useful about, but in the generation of this substance. We call it substance, vibrational substance. You can't get your hands on it. You can't manipulate it. But it will take form according to the design that is present in that level of being into which the substance is generated. It takes spiritual form, I suppose you could say. If you want to describe it, we have to use words out of our language in order to describe things. It's difficult because there haven't been any words to do it, because it hasn't been done. Nobody knows what it is, so there are no words for it. We have to use analogies in one way or another to begin to be acquainted with what it is that happens. There is an ark, a vibrational ark, taking form. Generated because there are those who have been drawn together by Spirit to participate in the process. The process involves changes occurring in one's own human nature. And as those changes occur, vibrational substance is generated. And that vibrational substance accommodates the design in Spirit. There is something recorded that I remember it in one of the Gospels, Matthew, I guess, in connection with the gathering of the elect from one end of the heaven to the other. Doesn't say from one end of the earth to the other, but from one end of the heaven to the other. That is, in the field of this vibrational substance. If there has been a generation of this substance, it is because it has been resonant to the radiation which is present by reason of the focus of the Spirit of God on earth. As that has been present, there has been the radiation, and wherever there was substance in anyone which would resonate with that, they have been drawn. If you have genuinely been drawn here, it is because of that. It is not because, well, I decided to come. That's what human beings, the sort of attitude that people take, because they want to preserve their own supposed freedom, as they think of it. I decided to come, so that's why I'm here. Big me. I'm capable of doing this. A little humility would help. No, if there is a genuine coming together, it is not because anyone decided to do it. It is because of a substance present in one's own makeup which resonated with the radiation proceeding from the focus of spirit on earth. When there is that, something begins to be drawn together. May seem to be a slow, tedious process. I know over the years I've thought that from time to time, but it's the only way to go. Nothing else works. So stay with it. Be consistent. Not just for a week. Well, I'll see if it works. Won't on that basis. But because one couldn't do anything else. One holds that consistency over the years for however long is necessary. And behold, there is substance, amazingly, present in some human beings, which begins to resonate with that radiation. And the substance begins to come home. That doesn't necessarily mean that a person in Brazil jumps onto an aircraft and comes to Sunrise Ranch. The substance comes home wherever a person is. He doesn't really have to move. You may find that in the process of that substance coming home, the flesh has to move a bit too. Evidently, quite a bit of flesh was moved to be here today, not only in the dome, but in these other locations as well. But if it is a genuine coming, it is because of that resonance, and not because the individual imagines that he decided that he would come. Ultimately, we discover that one can't stay away. And again, I'm not talking necessarily about physical location, but stay away from the focus of spirit on earth through which that radiation comes. Then we find a relatedness to that, which is natural to each one. But it only happens because there is a substance already present to start with, and because there is subsequent increase of the generation. And that is the building of the ark. That is where we live and move and have our being. And we're no longer so concerned with external form. That's what most people fuss about, isn't it? I don't get along with so-and-so. Why? Because they rub me the wrong way. The external form of things. But you come back to spirit, and the substance that is resonating, and we discover that we all fit together. We're not all the same, but we all fit together. There is a design. There is an ark, in other words. There is an ark created of this vibrational substance, which is where we belong. Do you think anything is going to be preserved in the realm of form as we know it now? If you're stuck in the realm of form, you're stuck in something that is not going to be preserved. There is no safe place in the realm of form. This has been true all along, actually, but it seemed as though, in the past at least, one could dig a hole in the ground and hide oneself for a while. But we are discovering now that the fact is there is no safe place in the realm of form. That puts everybody on the spot. Because if you imagine the only safety is in the realm of form, you're sunk. The safe place is the ark. And the ark is a vibrational ark. And when we are familiar in our living with this vibrational ark, there we are. There we are, even though we may still at the moment be in form. People are beginning to see that this planet is shot. It's not going to be able to support human beings in the way they are accustomed to anymore. At least that point is in the offing, not very far away. One could compare that to the flood, I suppose. No place of safety except in the ark. Of course, that's an analogy. But this is the reality now. This is the ark now, which is being generated, or the substance for it is being generated, that the design of it may appear. And we find ourselves in certain relationships because of that. Because of the vibrational design, not because of physical form. We cling to physical form, we will find that we pass away. If we are at home in the vibrational ark, that does not pass away. And this relates to this matter of what they call today, I believe, isn't it, one of the days, harmonic convergence. There must be a place to converge. And that place doesn't exist because of something occurring in the galaxy. No, obviously, there are things occurring in the galaxy, things occurring in the solar system, things occurring all over. But the place of convergence only exists when there are those present on Earth, now in physical form, but at the same time in vibrational form, so there is a place of convergence. And certainly we have discovered, it's nothing new, the idea of harmonic convergence, is it? We have discovered ourselves being drawn in various ways into various configurations of people who don't usually get along too well, to start with at least, but to the extent that they're not so hooked on form, they begin to find that they do have a natural association. They do blend together. They are part of one thing which already exists, but which hasn't been known because there has been no vibrational substance to accommodate it. Now, in generating that vibrational substance, we begin to accommodate it. But if we keep reverting back into this business of reacting to what's happening in form, then out we go. We're overboard. We're no longer in the ark. Because the ark is a vibrational ark, composed of vibrational substance. And we find that it has a very specific design, just as apparently that old wooden ark had back there. So we share this opportunity in this moment to be together in the sanctuary which we ourselves bring, where this vibrational substance is present and spirit reigns supreme.
It is a pure delight to be here in this place with you this morning, to have converged here, as we all have. We've all come a considerable distance, whether just now or at some point earlier, because we could do nothing else. And that is a joy. The midnight express of the human state roars noisily and with increasing speed down a track to disaster. But we have a chance to share with you in the focus of spirit, in the rhythm, the natural and easy rhythm of spirit here now, and to know the ease and the safety of that and the purposefulness of that. And it is pure joy to be with you in that.
I rejoice in your words, and it needs to be remembered that our purpose is not to stop the train. If you try to stop the train, you'll be squashed. Let the train go where it's going. It's going there anyway. But let the ark be present. So there is space on earth in this vibrational substance where life is, where the truth is, where the reality of love is. And we have been in the process of discovering that this is all true.